Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first installment of the Atop the Pit Box interview series, where we will be bringing in and sitting down virtually, of course, with members of the NASCAR media, men and women that are head on in the sport, and hopefully some drivers down the road. But we'll not waste any more time. We'll bring in our first guest here, Mr. Davey Segal of Frontstretch and NBCSports Washington. Davey, how you doing, man? Thanks for taking the time today.
No problem. Doing well. I didn't know this is the first installment. Wow, I got a lot of pressure to live up to. Wow, you didn't give me this in the pre-show briefing. I feel very caught off guard, but I'm ready for the challenge.
Absolutely, man. You can't start any better. So before we actually dive into the weekend of Pocono, I just want to give viewers your perspective. I want you to hit us with the Davey Segal story. Kind of talk to me a little bit about your passion for motorsports, where it originated, and how it's led you to where you are today.
Well, it might take up the whole 15 minutes here, but no, I'll make it somewhat short and sweet. So when I was young, I think I was born in 96, so I was like 4 or 5-ish. My dad was big into NASCAR, and he was watching. He was watching on TV all the time. He drove to some races. We live in the DC area in Maryland, and he drove to Daytona every year, drove to Indianapolis every year. He was a big Dale Jarrett fan, and I didn't really have a favorite driver because I was 4. And I was just watching to watch. But I knew Dale Earnhardt was the guy who won all the time, so I liked him. And then February 2001 happened. I was kind of too young to comprehend the fact that he had passed away. So my dad pretty much just said, hey, Dale's not going to race anymore. This guy Kevin Harvick's going to race instead. So 4-year-old me was like, okay, cool. And he wins in his 3rd start. So I'm like, okay, cool. 4-year-old me made a great pick. And then 2002, which is kind of when everything snowballed into what it became. Kevin ran a special paint team at Bristol with E.T. on the car, which is my favorite movie at the time. So I started freaking out when I saw it on TV. I was like, Mommy, that's E.T. on the car. And she's like, yep, it is. And then that was 2002. Fast forward to 2020, 18 years later, here I am. I've kind of put my fandom of everything in NASCAR to the side and have put on my proverbial media hat. But it's been a long, fun journey from fan to media to try. Like, literally, the hardest thing that I did in my life probably was, and I'm still kind of doing it sometimes, is shedding the fan inside of me. Like, when I'm watching a race, or if I'm there, if I get a cool opportunity, I got to be like, all right, look, like, you're here to do a job, do the job, and to not get lost in the moment. But it's been really fun. Had some opportunities, as you mentioned, at NBCSports Washington as an intern, now working there as a freelance production assistant, doing some work with Frontstretch, and was covering the K&M Pro Series East and West for NASCAR home tracks for the past 3 or so years. So it's been fun, man. Hopefully the start of a very long and successful journey.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of great experience there. I'm sure you're only going to find even more success. But now let's circle back to the weekend, because it was a historic one at Pocono, the first doubleheader in the sports history. I mean, we had a cup race on Saturday, 3 races on Sunday. I mean, it was jam-packed. So talk to me a little bit. What are your key takeaways from this first doubleheader? Do you think it was a success at a track like Pocono? It doesn't necessarily produce the best racing. Do you think it's something that you will possibly see more frequently down the line?
Yes, and yes. The thing that I was a little, I guess you could say, skeptical about when the doubleheader was first announced was the fact that it was at Pocono, just because of the weather. I mean, us being from the East Coast, we know that up there in Long Pond, Pennsylvania, by the Pocono Mountains, and watching the sport for as long as we have, it always rains at Pocono, like always, and they don't have lights, so that's a problem to go through as well. We ran into that problem the weekend prior at Talladega. But I think the biggest hurdle that was to be done for NASCAR was the logistics of the entire situation, because you didn't just have 2 cup races. You had an Xfinity race, a truck race, and an ARCA race. And because of the weather on Saturday that happened, you had to move the truck race to Sunday as well. So you had a triple header on the same day at the same track for the first time in NASCAR history, on the same weekend that you had the first back-to-back double header at the same track in NASCAR history. I think it worked really well. Logistically, I know it was a bit of a hassle for the teams, because Chris Gabehart, the winning crew chief from Sunday, was asked about the doubleheader and how it worked. And he kind of paused and he was like, got to be careful with how I word this. And then he said, I like whatever is entertaining for you guys. And that was his way of basically saying this worked the teams to death, because when they got done on Saturday, the race ended, probably around 6:30, 7-ish. They were working in the garage of Pocono until 10:30, 11, and then it's another half an hour to the hotels over there in Pocono. You get a little bit of sleep. You get up, you have to drive another half an hour back to be there when the garage opens at 7 a.m. and work on your car even more, especially for the teams that ended up going to backup cars for Sunday because of the damage that was sustained on Saturday. Logistically, it worked, though. And if it can work in Pocono when there's a lot of rain, when there's a day with 3 races at the same track back to back to back staggered like that, and we're probably going to see doubleheaders announced here in the coming weeks at Dover and Michigan, I think it's going to work again. And I think in 2021, whenever we see that schedule released, you'll probably see a handful of doubleheader weekends on that as well.
Yeah, and teams, I mean, ever since the sport came back from this pandemic, teams have been pushed to their limit, and one thing that's definitely been a hindrance to the sport has been this weather. It seems like every race up to this point, whether it's lightning delays, whether it's the rain itself, I mean, you watch guys get into their car for 2 laps and then sit for an hour. I mean, it's dreadful at points. But I think the sport's done a phenomenal job with placing and protocols with what's been going on, racing at the essential tracks that are closest to the shop. And it's just great to have NASCAR back once again. But this weather, man, it's been crazy.
Dude, I'm telling you. So it's not even just when they came back from the pandemic. Like, I was at Daytona, got rained out till Monday. We understand Daytona, rain, that happens a lot. But I was at Vegas too. It doesn't rain in the desert, only when NASCAR comes to town. And then, I mean, the race ended up going off fine, but I think it was Eric Estep who said out of like the 9 or 10 races that have been going on since NASCAR's been back, I think all of them have been affected by weather in some way, whether it's a lightning delay or postponement. I don't know. But even before the pandemic hit, like, rain was still wreaking havoc on NASCAR's schedule. It's just, I wish we could just like have a retractable roof on every track that just travels with the air titans or something. Like, that would solve a lot of problems. But yeah, I want to like figure out a way. Can you like cover the tracks? Can the banking like work in a way where like the weepers don't like have as much water? I don't know. That's the $1 million question, because I'm sure that it would save millions of dollars for teams and the sanctioning body alike. But who knows, man? We got to deal with it. And Mother Nature has not been playing nice. So hopefully she does this weekend.
Absolutely. And hopefully as we get into the second half of the season, starts playing a little better as well. And let's get into this, because we are very close to the midseason mark. And I would say it's no question that Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, the 2 winners of this past weekend at Pocono, have been the most dominant throughout the year. Kevin Harvick, ever since Daytona, has been on a tear. I think he's only got 3 finishes outside of the top 10 this year. And he's been the only real bright spot at Stewart-Haas Racing. Eric Almirola's put together a couple of nice runs the past couple of weeks. Clint Boyer's been pretty solid as well, but you look at Cole Custer and even most of the rookies outside of, I would say, Tyler Reddick and John Hunter Nemechek, who have really, really proven themselves in the equipment that they're in. Looking down the line over the course of this next half season, we'll start first. Who do you think is the most poised to challenge Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick up there at the top?
It's probably a cliche answer, but I would say themselves. They've separated themselves pretty handily from the pack. I think these last 2 races, although they were at the same track with the same conditions, I understand that, but the cream rises to the top at some point, doesn't it? I mean, they finished 1-2 on Saturday. They're inverted, so they started 20th or 21st and 22nd, and they still run 1-2. So I think that, honestly, if you're going to look at it from an unbiased perspective, Chris Gabehart right now is the best crew chief in all of NASCAR. And Denny Hamlin is probably in that sentence, or you can count them on 2 or 3 fingers, among the best drivers right now in all of NASCAR. And he doesn't even have a championship. And Kevin Harvick has a championship with Rodney Childers. Like you mentioned, they've only finished outside of the top 10 3 times, I think, this year. If they keep up this pace, which is going to be hard to do, because I think it's somewhat reminiscent of Jeff Gordon's championship season in '96, I want to say, looking at the stats. I mean, they're going to cruise to the regular season championship, which is an extra 15 playoff points for them, which is pretty much a guaranteed spot in the championship at Phoenix this year. So it would be cliche to say only themselves can beat themselves as we go on in the season, but I'll also probably look to, even though he hasn't earned a single playoff point this season, which blows my mind. I think that's actually the craziest thing that's happened among all this. You can't count out Kyle Busch. He's a two-time champ for a reason, defending for a reason. But it's crazy to me that he hasn't even won a single stage this year. And I think it's interesting, too, to think about. Kyle talked about on his post-rec interview on Sunday how they kind of used the race on Saturday as a practice session because and David Wilson of Toyota Racing Development chatted about this as well a few weeks back, that Kyle is so meticulous. And that's what makes him really good behind the wheel, because they'll be practicing at a race weekend for, 2.5, 3 hours on Friday and Saturday, and they'll be running hundreds of laps. And Kyle will be trying to get the millimeter of stagger out of a tire, or like the littlest tiny things from his crew chief, Adam Stevens, to try to make that car the best that it can be. And since the pandemic, since racing has come back during the pandemic, there's been no practice, none at all. And that has not allowed Kyle Busch to thrive in the way that he usually does. But you saw on Saturday, after, 140 laps under their belts, they fixed some things overnight and they were in the lead, or what would have been the lead when he got wrecked. So if you had to make me pick one driver, I still think it's hard to go against Kyle Busch to challenge Denny and Kevin when it comes down to it. But Hendrick has been really strong with the Chevy body. Chase Elliott's leading the brigade over there. But Hendrick as a whole has just been a little bit too inconsistent for me to put them as the one guy that can probably challenge the 11 and the 4. I'd probably go Kyle Busch.
Yeah, it's definitely unorthodox seeing Kyle Busch kind of, mid-pack not necessarily mid-pack, but at the end of the top 10 in terms of points. I mean, like you said, no wins up to this point. He's got an average finish of about 15th, and up to this point last year, 4 wins, and also an average finish of 6th. And even at that, he's not finding clean air as much. He hasn't led that many laps at all this year. And as you said, no stage wins. So, we're seeing that lack of practice hit on drivers, much like Kyle Busch, who's defending a championship this year. But kind of going backwards now to what we had just discussed, there have been a number of drivers that have underperformed, and, enter Kyle Busch right there. But who do you think has the most to prove over this next stretch?
Man, I don't know. I was really big on Alex Bowman when he had that hot streak earlier on in the year. And I don't have the stats in front of me, but I mean, the 88 team has been pretty dismal as of late, I want to say in the last month or so. And I play some DraftKings here and there, and I put Alex Bowman in my lineup, and I'm just expecting him to go. And he doesn't go. I'm like, what's going on? Because he won at Fontana, and I consider Pocono somewhat similar to Fontana because of the high speeds, long straightaways, but didn't work out for Bowman. I think if he wants to be considered a real threat for the championship, which I think he was when he was winning races and contending in the top 5 week in, week out earlier on in the season pre-pandemic, you would have to list Alex Bowman on your short list of drivers that would be ready to win a championship. But right now, I would not put him on my list. Ryan Blaney, he's had a really, really solid season, and he got that win at Talladega. But this weekend at Pocono was not too kind to him. He was running up front for some of it, but it was a mix of strategy and the car just falling off at inopportune times. But again, if he wants to be considered one of the favorites for the championship, I think he's got to put a lot more effort into finishing these races off, because we've seen in the past earlier on in this season, he's had the speed, he's had the track position. It's either been a call atop the pit box that has doomed him, or it's just been an error on a restart or something that's out of his control. So part of that falls on the driver, but part of that's also circumstance. You talked about Cole Custer. It's tough, too, going back to the practice thing, because rookies rely on practice a lot, especially never turning laps in a cup car before. They've been to the venues, but they've never been in these vehicles. But when you see guys like Tyler Reddick that are running up front almost every single week, he almost won the damn thing at Homestead. Christopher Bell with a career best finish at Pocono, got a 4th place run on Saturday before wrecking out Sunday. John Hunter Nemechek is blowing everybody out of the water considering what equipment he's in. And Cole Custer, arguably, is in the best equipment out of all of those people. So I think he may have something to prove, but at the same time, I mean, we know why he's there. Besides his talent, his dad obviously has a big pull in that organization. I'm not saying he didn't deserve that seat, which he 1,000% did, in my opinion. But I think for his mental state, I feel like he's got to pick up the pace a little bit at least and show some promise of some top 15 runs or some raw speed to contend in the top 10, because right now he's not even scratching the surface.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned before, definitely seeing these unique circumstances hit drivers one way and hurt them in the other. But I want to now just touch upon real quick Bubba Wallace. We have obviously seen how he has been an incredible ambassador for this sport, the changes that the sport has made over these last couple of weeks, and just what's been going on in the world and how NASCAR and how Bubba Wallace has responded. He's thrown together a number of solid races even during this time. He's been running consistently top 15, top 20 in a position and with a team where I think a lot of people forget last year was almost ready to shut their doors. Bubba Wallace didn't have a crew chief for a majority of the offseason. They really ran to try and get that together. He finished 28th in the points last year, but he's been running pretty solid, and I think definitely leaps and bounds of where the team was last year. But, I mean, what do you say about the efforts that Bubba has been doing? I mean, I can't even imagine how much pressure he must be under right now, being the only African-American driver and now the face of the sport over these past couple of weeks. What do you think as far as the efforts that NASCAR has put in place and how Bubba has presented himself over this time?
Yeah, so I'll take them in the order that you presented them. In terms of on-track performance, I was talking with my dad earlier. Bubba's running like 5 to 7 positions better weekly than he was last year. And I think a big part of that has to do with getting his crew chief, Jerry Baxter, back atop the pit box. They had a lot of success back in the Truck Series, and I think that's doing wonders for him. And he's probably also just getting a little bit more experience. This is not his first rodeo in the Cup Series. It's what is his third full-time year, second, something like that. I think third. Yeah. So he's been to these tracks before. He's raced these cars before. He knows what to expect. And also a lot of the Ford and Toyota drivers have talked publicly about how they feel that Chevrolet has a distinct advantage with their new body and their new nose that they rolled out for this year, specifically designed for this aerodynamic rules package, whereas Ford and Toyota basically just stuck with the status quo with what they had, and Chevrolet, which just came in guns a-blazing and had this new thing designed specifically for this package. So that's why they kind of got out to a really hot start, and I think Bubba is a classic example of that, because you talk about people punching above their weight. I think of John Hunter Nemechek, and right now I got to put Bubba Wallace in that same sentence as well. But it pales in comparison to what he's been doing off track, the leader that he's become, not only in the sports community, not only the NASCAR community, but nationally, internationally. I mean, everybody's talking about Bubba Wallace, and I'm sure you're the same way. Like, all my friends that don't know anything about NASCAR other than the fact that it's what I do are blowing up my phone nonstop, like, oh, wow, like Bubba's doing this, Bubba's doing that, I'm going to buy a Bubba shirt, blah, 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 blah. And it's just crazy how it's all blown up. And I think I wrote a couple pieces on frontstretch.com, and you could feel free to check those out. They're on my Twitter account as well. Basically where I stand on what NASCAR has been doing in terms of the stances progressively that they've been taking. And I think it's great. I don't see a reason why you should purposefully exclude a portion of your fan base, whether they be black, white, yellow, red, blue, doesn't matter. And I think also it was a big step too when they partnered with the, and forgive me for not knowing it off the top of my head, but they partnered with an LGBTQ organization as well. And to my knowledge, that's the first time that NASCAR has mentioned or done anything to support gay pride. And I was like, whoa, like, I didn't expect that. Like, even the Confederate flag, I kind of saw coming, because you heard rumblings about it, the whole Black Lives Matter movement, and Bubba speaking out so eloquently and publicly about it. I could see the writing on the wall there, and some reports from some people in the industry were basically indicating that that was going to be a road that NASCAR was going to go down more specifically soon. But the gay pride thing, I was like, whoa, like, that came out of nowhere, but I'm happy it did. So everything that they've done, and it all happened in a span of like 5 days when Bubba wore the Black Lives Matter shirt at Atlanta. Kirk Price took a knee for the national anthem. Black Lives Matter was on the car at Martinsville that I saw in person. It was crazy. The same day, they banned the Confederate flag, and they changed the anthem policy. And in between there, they had the gay rights advocacy as well. So that's 6 things that they did in what, a 3, 4, 5 day span. Forgive me for forgetting what it is now a couple weeks later. But I mean, this is NASCAR we're talking about. I mean, because you've watched it for so long. Same with me. Like, you're always proud to be a NASCAR fan and talk to your friends about it, because it's a niche thing and it's very interesting and specific. But at the same time, there's always that cloud that's kind of hanging over you. It's like, yeah, but aren't they kind of racist because the Confederate flag thing? And like, do they even have any black drivers in this thing? And then you have to explain to them that, no, like the pit crews are actually really diverse. There's a lot of people in executive roles with teams that are doing great things. There's a Drive for Diversity program that's been in existence for a while. And that's all fun and good. But at the same time, when you go into a racetrack and you see Confederate flags, kind of wipes that all away for a new fan that's coming in that happens to be a person of color. So what they've been doing, man, it's great. I don't see any negative to it whatsoever. And if nothing else, it's weeding the racists out and putting them right in front of our eyes to get rid of them. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Continuing to progress forward, is all we can ask for. And NASCAR's done a phenomenal job in that. But before I let you go, I know, and you alluded to this earlier, you've done a lot of work in the ARCA Menard Series garage. So I'd like to pick your brain for 1 second, because we all hear about Haley Deegan, how much of a talent that she is. She's a great personality, has a huge presence on social media as well. But outside of Haley, who is one driver in the ARCA Menard Series that we need to keep our eye out for that you think is going to make an immense impact in the sport in years to come?
So I'll give you a 2-for-1 there. He was in the ARCA Menard Series West, or formerly known as K&N West, and now he's full-time in the Truck Series, Derek Kraus. I think if he's able to continue with Toyota backing with Bill McAnally Racing and get the proper resources and just gain that experience on the bigger tracks, he's going to be somebody that you're going to be hearing a lot about moving forward. He won pretty much everything you can in K&N, including a championship. So Derek Kraus in the Truck Series as a young guy who I kind of consider kind of still on that ARCA level, just because he didn't really make too many ARCA starts. He was just an ARCA West. But specifically with ARCA Menards, there's a few names. I go back and forth, and I'm friends with Ty, and I've had this conversation with him. But Ty Gibbs, because you look at him, you see he's kind of braggadocious. He's got a lot of swagger. He's got a lot of bravado. And he's, of course, is Joe Gibbs' grandson, and he's driving Joe Gibbs equipment. So everybody's like, oh, this rich kid just getting his granddaddy's money, whatever. And I struggle to discern how much of this was talent and how much of this was equipment. And I actually talked to some drivers about it on and off the record. And a lot of them were kind of in the middle of saying, no doubt about it, he's got the best car in the field. But if you have the best car in the field and you don't win with it, that basically proves it for you. Ty's winning with the best car, time and time and time again. Whether that's ARCA East, ARCA Menards in general. I call it national because there's a lot of names. But Ty Gibbs is one to watch for sure. And I think, as long as he has his last name, which I don't see changing anytime soon, and he has the talent that he's progressed with throughout the ranks, he's going to be a pretty big name to watch, as well as Sam Mayer. These kids are both so darn young. I think Ty is 15, 16, 17. I think Sam just turned 17 or 18. He's the reigning ARCA East champion. He's going for a back-to-back championship in that series as well with GMS Racing. Same thing. He has the best car over there, but he's winning with it a lot. And I get the car counts are low, so, stats may be a little bit inflated, but he's winning week in and week out. And so is Ty Gibbs. And I don't have too much interaction with him, or I haven't in the past, but Chandler Smith, I'm a big fan of David Smith with Motorsports Analytics and Alan Cavana. They have a podcast called Positive Aggression. And Chandler Smith has been heralded as the number one prospect for the last couple of years. And when I watch him race, whether it be in a KBM truck in his first ever start, winning the pole, or whether that be in an ARCA Menard Series car for Venturini, I see why. He has a lot of raw talent, and he's a pretty good personality too. So I know that was a lot, but I'll give you 3 guys in ARCA: Sam Mayer, Ty Gibbs, and Chandler Smith. Those are 3 guys that I'm watching to progress through the ranks as some youngsters as well. But also give a call to Michael Self, because, there's those guys in the Truck Series that are old, that never moved up, Matt Kraft and Johnny Sauter, whatever. That's Michael Self for ARCA, and he's a really, really cool dude, and he's probably going to win the championship running away with it this year, if you ask me. So he's one to watch in ARCA if you want to see a veteran that knows what he's doing. That's the 25 Michael Self.
Good stuff. Well, we'll be sure to look out for those guys for the rest of the NASCAR season. But most importantly, Davey, we appreciate you sharing your knowledge here with us today. I'll leave all of your social links and your website down in the description where people can go find you, check out your stuff. But again, much appreciated, and we look forward to talking to you sooner.
No problem, man. Thanks for having me on. Good to chat with you. Hope episode 1 will be the best ever.
That's right. Starting off strong, Davey. Appreciate you.
Yep.